Welcome back to Story Time with Petey. This was happened in Willow Springs. We moved there in 1976 or 77, 75. Anyway, we lived on the pipeline, which was power towers, and then gas, Illinois National Gas underneath. And we could ride our bikes back there and snake hunt. So it was a fun place to grow up. Um, Remember, my brother kind of explored, and then they released me out into the wild. And one of the first places that we went was at the end of the pipeline. Not quite the end. There was a creek, and there was a like a drop off. We used that as a ramp. We would ride down 30 yards or whatever, and then get our breath, and then go as fast as we can and hit this jump and get some significant air. So I was down there with my older brother, and it was just good, clean fun. We weren't fighting. He wasn't picking on me. Having a nice time jumping these bikes and measuring to see who could go further. And I was always able to beat him because of I had real strong legs and I could go fast, but I was lighter than him. So I was good at jumping and doing wheelies, and he ended up more motorcycle riding. I wiped out. I just wasn't. I was really klutzy, and my parents knew that if they gave me a dirt bike, I'd end up in a body cast. So I was always the. I had a mongoose that I rode. So anyway, I'm I'm up. I had ridden down there, and I'm catching my breath, and I hear this racket in the woods, and it sounds like it literally what I thought it was a bear, like running through the woods. And these particular woods, what I remember, it was what was called Butches's farm, which was a whole bunch of land that had overgrown. So the trees that were there were not full grown trees. They were like saplings. They were like, it was like all the same height of these weird, like skinny. Anyway, so it sounded like someone was running through there and hitting quite a bit of those. Like they weren't like how an Indian would go real quietly. This person was really loud, and I got scared. I heard that, and I rode down and didn't do the jump. I told my brother, if there's something in the woods. He said, there's nothing in those woods. He turned around and went down for his turn to jump, got set up, and a guy in a dark blue jumpsuit. The guy looks like he's skinny build, and he had a Manson, beard, hippie looking guy, and he had a gun case. And this guy's eyes were like wide, and he was running for his life. So my brother, when he heard that noise, he did the same thing I did. He rode up to me, and we both were ready to go on our bikes. What is this thing coming out of the woods? And here's this guy. And my brother starts saying to me, ask him what he's hunting. Like, here, my brother wanted to have a conversation with this guy. And I see he's running for his life. And I'm like, I'm not asking him anything. So the guy, I seem to remember one of us did interact and say something with him. He looked at us and looked. He just did not respond and kept running. And again, he's like flailing, and he's got this gun case. It's like looks like it's a rifle, and it's a zipper, like a leatherette case. So whoever rides back to take this jump, one of us rides back to take this jump. I think maybe a couple of jumps go by, like some time goes by, like a minute or two. And here they come, cops, like a lot of cop cars. And I had never seen cops in the pipeline. I think that was the only time. And they were like, what I remember, it was like a eat my dust. Like they were just coming like one after another, like all different cop cars, full cherries going with the smoke, dust flying up and flying by us. And my brother starts waving to the cops to tell them what we saw. Like, he went that way. And in my recollection of it is that a cop did stop, and we, like, in the end, one of the last cops stopped and said, "Did you boys see anything?" And we said, "Yeah, this guy came running out of the woods. He had a dark blue jumpsuit on and looked like Charles Manson, and he had a gun case, looked like a gun case, and he went running that way." We asked him what he was hunting, but he didn't reply. And the cop said, "Good work, thanks," and kept going. So we couldn't believe it. We went home and we told our mom, and at dinner we told Dad. We said we saw this bad guy, and I always thought he was an escaped convict. I think more likely this guy was just a criminal and that's how he dressed. And they came to serve a warrant on him, some hefty warrant. And he took off running with this gun case. And because he was armed, they just called in, they called it in, and it ended up being a huge deal chase. And that would have been, like 1976 or 1977 when that happened. Now, fast forward a couple years, my brother has gotten older, and there was a real lot of drama between him and my father. It was bad. Now, where we lived, our patio butted right up to the pipeline, and to the right was like this candlelight drive, just past the pipeline. It was Vito Zito's house, and then going west, there was this area, no man's land, which we called the wildlife sanctuary. And it was weird. It was like a triangular piece of land that butted up against on one side to the pipeline. And then there's a street that dead ends. And my brother used to live over there, coming out to Wolf Road. But this wildlife sanctuary was like these super tall, like pine looking trees, like skinny, shapely, like skinny pines, all in a row, so you couldn't see in there. And they had wrapped the entire tree line with like some kind of like chicken wire going all the way, like way high up, so you couldn't even climb and get up there. And they had put vines on it so you couldn't see in, and when you did see in, it was all like really beautiful in there with a lot of colorful flowers and bird feeders and all kinds of birds in there. It was just full of birds. So it seemed to me that maybe it wasn't something by the local government, like an official wildlife sanctuary, more than it was just an old couple that really didn't ever want to be disturbed. And this is what they were into, was gardening, and they set up this little paradise in this triangular piece of land where they had all their birds come. And it was never to be, they would never see me crossing them up, riding a wheelie through their yard, which if you lived in that area, you're prone to see something like that. Me or one of my brothers doing something you shouldn't be doing. So they had that wildlife sanctuary there, and this is like years later. And I'm hanging out with Jim Musel. His dad was the fire chief of Willow Springs, and they had weapons, they had guns. And his dad like knew about World War II, and like, he had a shop with craftsman tools. Like, he was a typical beer drinking, cigar smoking American patriot, just that type of guy. And his son was maybe socially awkward and picked on in the neighborhood, but I hung off with Jim from time to time. And the thing about Jim was what set him apart was he had a dad that tried. And so Jim knew a lot, where if you could get past the social and awkwardness, he knew all this stuff that the other kids in the neighborhood were just clueless about. Because his dad was into history and stuff. So from time to time, I would pal around with Jim, and it would always end up with him doing something like eating his boogers or eating dog, just something, disgusting. So I brought up the wildlife sanctuary, and he's like, "Oh, that's the Wickelsons." Like, he knew the people that lived there, and they're cool. And we went over there on our bikes, and we're peeking through. He was telling me whatever he knew, and here is the gun case. I found it. That guy who had run from the cops hid his gun in that wall of trees. He had buried it in there underneath some fence or something, and those people had never come on the other side of it, and they had never seen it. And because that was like a no man's land, like we couldn't cut through there. I wished I could cut through there, believe me, because I had to take the pipeline all the way, which was up a rocky hill. So I would always take Forest Woods Drive instead of taking that way to get to Wolf. And I was always like fantasizing about, wouldn't it be better? I mean, sometimes I would even go the other way, go out of my way, go by Vito Zito's, cut through his yard, and then get onto Candlelight Drive and go out onto Wolf that way. Because, see, there was a swimming pool, and that access to that other part of the earth was just, that was a whole nother place I could go and not worry about the Magruder kids and my brother spoking me. They used to throw pipes through my front tire. Anyway, I immediately I realized that if Jim went home, we open up the case and it's a 30-06 rifle with a scope in perfect condition. And it's like, from what I remember, it was a really nice rifle. It was the nicest rifle I had ever seen. I don't know what brand it was, but it looked totally like an assassin's rifle. That's what it looked like. And I wanted it. I had found it. It was my thing. I brought it up to Jim. I went over there with him. He went there to show me or whatever, but I found it. And I was like, don't tell your dad. Because his dad was a fire chief, and I knew they would go down there and it would end up in their possession. And I was thinking we could at least get a couple of days of fooling around with it ourselves. Like oiling it and cleaning it and playing with the scope and shit. I wanted to play with it before the adults got a hold of it. Hopefully, maybe be able to get a bullet and fire it was what I really wanted to do. So, of course, I see my brother and I blab to my brother because he was with me when we had saw that guy running, and he said, "No, you're lying," which I wasn't a liar. So he knew I wasn't. And then he said, "Show me." So I took him over there and showed him. After making him swear that he wouldn't take the gun, that he wouldn't tell my folks, that blah, 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 that it was mine and all this. And immediately he took the gun. I took him over there and showed him it. My mom rang the bell. We came back. I had to set the table. He went back over there, grabbed the gun, and hid it. As soon as we got done eating, I went over there and it was gone. And I met Jim Musel, and he said it's gone. He said, "You must have told someone." And I said, "Yeah, I told my brother, and it's gone." So, very shortly after that, I heard a lot of noise, and it was my dad. And I seem to remember he either used the grinder or a hacksaw, but he sawed the barrel off of the gun. He made it so that gun was not able to. He disabled the weapon, and it was jammed in the top of the garbage can, sticking out in pieces. And the day that it was my job to drag the garbage can out, I dragged the garbage can out, and I kept riding my bike back past and forth looking at it. And I took the scope. It had a scope on it, so I went over there and got a screwdriver or whatever I needed, removed the scope. And I had that. I had it hidden it. I was scared that my dad would find it and I would get in trouble, but he never did. And I ended up disassembling it. I think it was made in Switzerland, or the optics. I think it said Swiss optics on it. It was a nice scope. It was really, like, all of the threading on it was just really well made. It was a cool piece. And so that's the story about growing up in Willow Springs. Just like randomly finding a rifle, seeing this guy fleeing from the cops. And I wish I knew more about it, but that was a story I recanted to my wife today, and I thought it was worth sharing that story. So anyway, happy Easter. Take care of yourselves, and